I entertained myself when there wasn't much else going on. Um, it first became a problem for me, I think, at about the age of 8. I was having some issues at school. This is back in the 1980s, and in those days we didn't call it bullying unless someone was actually hitting you, which they weren't. But there was a lot of teasing and name calling, and just generally being left out of things and ignored and stuff. And it wasn't making me feel very good. And so I retreated into my imaginary world, into my stories. And I stayed there for about the next 10 years. Um, and things got a little bit better for me about the age of 18 when I started at university. I was doing a little bit better for a while, but unfortunately, it was fairly short lived because towards the end of my first year in university, I had my first bout of depression, which was something that I was then going to suffer with on and off for the next 30 years or so. Um, and for anyone on the call who's ever experienced depression, you'll know it can just feel like you're wading through treacle sometimes. You have this huge, overwhelming sadness and just this emotional pain, and you just want to escape from it. And my mind has this built-in escape mechanism. I can take myself off to my imaginary world, and the depression would just not be there for a while. And it became a coping mechanism and a valuable one. I mean, there were times when I'm absolutely certain it saved my life, but it comes at a price. I mean, people who are living with maladaptive daydreaming will know it just takes hours and hours. People can be lost in their imaginary world for like 5 or 6 hours a day, some people. It takes massive amounts of your time, but it does more than that as well. For me, it took my social skills because having lost basically all of my teenage years to maladaptive daydreaming, I had never learned the basics of how to make friends or how to be a good friend or anything like that. I got into adulthood with very limited social skills. And I think the bigger thing it took from me actually was motivation, because why would I make the effort to try and achieve something in real life and put a lot of time and energy into something when I could have something even more exciting and more vibrant in my head right now? There was just no motivation to do anything. And so I just kind of drifted through life, and I did okay. I had times when I was fairly functional. I did manage to graduate from university. I got married. I raised 3 children. I've always been able to hold down a job, but I was just kind of drifting and not really feeling like I had any sort of meaning in life until when I was 46 years old. I just sort of a chance Google search led to me discovering that maladaptive daydreaming is an actual thing and other people do it. And I'm throwing my age in there deliberately because I want everyone on this call to know that there is no time limit on when you can heal from this. I discovered what maladaptive daydreaming was at the age of 46, and I healed at the age of 49. It is never too late. And I think one of the advantages I had being older when I discovered that this was a thing was that I immediately saw the connection between the maladaptive daydreaming and the depression. I could see that in the times in my life when my depression had been really bad, my maladaptive daydreaming had been really bad too. And at the times when my depression was a bit more manageable, then I was also able to better control the daydreaming. And so that kind of put me in the mindset that you don't fix maladaptive daydreaming in isolation. You have to look at it in the context of your whole life, and even in the context of your whole self as well. You've got to kind of try and fix all of it, because for most people, I think maladaptive daydreaming begins as a coping mechanism. There's something in life that's not quite right. In my case, it was depression, but for other people, it might be anxiety, or maybe they're living with undiagnosed ADHD or autism, or maybe there's a toxic relationship that they need to leave or something. But there's something in life that's not quite right. And that your attempt to sort of cope with that is what pushes you into the daydreaming becoming maladaptive. And so, as long as that thing you're coping with is there, you're always going to have that push into your daydreams, and it's going to be really, really hard to break out of it. And then there's another problem as well, which is that if you've been living with maladaptive daydreaming for any length of time, then it creeps into every area of your life. You know, with me, it was that I didn't have great social skills. I also, you know, what friendships I did have, some of those friendships I lost because I didn't make the effort to keep in touch with people. You know, it held me back in my career. I was still doing an entry level job in my 40s. It just affects everything. And so if you've been struggling with maladaptive daydreaming for a while, your life's probably in a bit of a mess, to put it mildly. And so again, if you then try and break out of the maladaptive daydreaming, you realize you've just got this really boring life with not very much going on compared to the exciting daydream world that you've just left. Again, it's just going to push you back in. And I see this with people saying on sort of social media and so on, that they need to fix the daydreaming first so that they'll then have time to fix everything else. And I don't think that's the right approach. I think you have to kind of work on it all at once, because you have to bring that sort of sense of meaning back into real life. If your daydreams are the only place you're finding meaning, then you're not going to be able to come back to reality. And for me, where I found that meaning was in writing. I mean, yeah, therapy was a huge part of the solution. Mindfulness was a huge part of the solution. But really what finally fixed it for me was accepting that I wanted to become a writer. And I'm not saying, I know Jayne said it's really common in maladaptive daydreamers that we become writers. I don't think we all do. I don't think the fact that you have stories in your head necessarily means that you're meant to write them down. But for me, that was the solution. I did need to write. And so, yeah, I think what I just really wanted to get across was, I'm sure in the rest of this webinar, we'll circle back to the actual sort of specific things you can do, like therapy and like mindfulness. But really, you do have to see this as part of a bigger project, if you like, and you do have to heal from whatever other things you may have going on, and you do have to be working to build a life that's worth coming back to.
Great. We have so much more to say. And Kyla, while you were speaking, I think a lot of people, I was like, yes, this is true for me. And no, it's slightly different for me, but I am gonna, oh, and look at all the applause you're getting. That was so great. But I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I really want to hear from Rumzi, whose videos I've watched on YouTube over and over again, and who's also incredible. I could listen to both of you just speak all day. So Rumzi, with that, you take it away. But Kyla, we will be back with you.
Okay.
Sure, thank you. So I just want to check. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So so I could relate a lot to what Kyla said in many aspects, but I had maladaptive daydreaming in a bit of a different way. So my daydreams were mostly focused on rehearsing for future scenarios, so like potential future scenarios, or thinking and ruminating about things that happened in the past. So I also had some daydreams that were involved characters from TV shows, from movies, from video games, and sometimes also people that I knew in real life. And so, for example, it might involve me talking to them about something that was occurring during the day, or something that happened in the past, or something that was gonna that I thought could happen in the future. So it was like my mind was using these characters as a way to interact with me in the daydream. And there would also sometimes be an element of imagining fantasy scenarios with fictional characters. So let's say, for example, I was watching a TV show, reading a book. My mind would start wandering off with those characters that I'm experiencing in the book or the TV show, or for example, the video game, and I'd get distracted. And then I would be interacting with those characters for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour, for example, about something related to that TV show, or sometimes a completely different topic. And so sometimes these daydreams could last anywhere between a few minutes, but sometimes they could last for up to an hour or more as well. And although I mentioned a few minutes, it doesn't sound like a big deal. What would happen is I call them micro daydreams. So I would have multiple, like 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute daydreams over a period of time. So my mind will be jumping in and out of daydreams. And this would happen usually if I was talking to somebody. So I noticed when I was talking to somebody or in a group of people, I would be far less likely to daydream. But my mind will still try to do it, but it would do it very quickly. And I think it's because I think I was trying to not, I think I was trying to hide the fact that I was daydreaming. So it's like my mind knew, okay, we can't daydream for too long. We need to stay focused, but it would still happen. And the problem with that is I wouldn't focus on what was happening. I would miss things that people were talking about. And you can imagine how that would impact things like work and your relationships. And it did. So these daydreams I had, I came to realize were mostly anxiety driven. And that's why I would be lost in daydreams trying to prepare for various potential future scenarios over and over and over again. And with the rumination daydreams, they were mostly me. I was worrying about things that I had just done in the recent past. So let's say, for example, if I was at work and I spoke to somebody and the conversation ended, I noticed later on I'd start worrying, oh, did I say something stupid? I would notice like a tiny thing that was slightly maybe just a bit off in what I said, and then I would hyperfixate on that and I would ruminate about how I could have done that better over and over again. So they were mostly just really, it was anxiety driven. And sometimes what would happen is I would partly act out the daydreams as well. So, for example, with hand movements, walking around my room, I wouldn't do this when there were other people around. So I recognized there was an aspect of subconscious control where my mind would make it happen when I was alone. But when I was around other people I would interact with, it wouldn't really happen. I would have those micro daydreams instead. And sometimes I would even not speak out loud to the characters in daydreams, but my mouth would start moving as though I was speaking to those people. And yeah, in terms of how this affected me, well, I lost huge amounts of time. My focus and concentration was terrible. And it would take me quite a while to learn things sometimes because I just couldn't focus for long enough. And sometimes it was clear in my relationships I was spacing out. People could eventually tell. I think it's something that's, although I tried to hide, it was pretty obvious when, for example, I would miss something somebody had said. And in my work, it led me to making lots of mistakes, and that just increased anxiety. And ultimately, it led me to have very low self-worth because it was creating a sense of losing control. And that fed into existing depression and anxiety. So that's how I experienced maladaptive daydreaming for 10 years. So to recover, I first had to understand why I had maladaptive daydreaming in the first place. So really, it was a way to cope with pre-existing mental health issues I had developed. So that was depersonalization disorder, anxiety, and depression. There were some other things related to that, but that's the core of the issue. So really, maladaptive daydreaming was a way for me to escape and cope with that stress, with the fear from the depersonalization symptoms, and from the, I guess you'd call it emotional pain I was experiencing from those issues. So you could say it was really a way to dissociate, which is interesting because depersonalization disorder is already a dissociative disorder. So you could say I was dissociating from the pre-existing dissociation, which sounds kind of weird, but I realize it makes sense because it was a way for my mind to try to protect me. And although people may hear that, yeah, it took me 10 years to recover, it doesn't mean it has to be like that for other people, because sometimes people get worried when they hear that kind of time frame. But the only reason why it took so long is because this happened, I had the beginning of these issues in 2010, and there just wasn't a lot of information about depersonalization disorder and maladaptive daydreaming. And I also had, although I went for therapy multiple times, there was limited help they could give me, or sometimes I had to wait a long time to get help, to get appointments. So I had to do a lot of my own work to learn and figure things out as well. So I do think in this day and age, people can recover much faster because we have more information and awareness now. So really, to recover from maladaptive daydreaming, I had to really resolve the underlying causes of depersonalization, anxiety, and depression. And really, that was rooted in unresolved trauma from my childhood and my teenage years, and long-term chronic stress and long-term, what I would refer to as unmet emotional needs. So we all have, physical needs, but sometimes it's not as clear what our psychological and emotional needs are. And I had long-term unmet emotional needs. And so what that meant was I came to learn with working with therapists and research that my nervous system had become what I refer to as hypersensitive. So it didn't take a lot for my nervous system to trigger the fight, flight, and freeze response. And that's what would end up increasing stress and the depersonalization and the daydreaming. So the more stressed I was, the more anxiety I had, the more I would be daydreaming because it was a way to cope with that. And so really therapy was a key aspect to this. There were really three parts to the recovery. There was therapy and mindfulness meditation and concentration-based meditation, which I'll go into now. So therapy helped because it helped to bring up those suppressed traumatic memories I had and emotions that were suppressed as well. And through bringing them up in therapy, through talking about it and reliving it, it allowed me to, I had to feel those emotions and relive those memories completely to process them. And it was, of course, as you can imagine, difficult and it takes time, but it's through the experiencing of that you, in a way, you start to release the trauma, but also it sends a signal to your mind that you're safe now, that experience from the past is in the past now. It's not happening now. And also therapy helped me to understand what my unmet emotional needs were and how also I might have been, without realizing, contributing to the stress that I was experiencing. So, for example, having just terrible sleep habits or not knowing how to set healthy boundaries with people, which would become stressful, or just something as simple as just not learning when I needed to take a break from work and just to do nothing and rest. So a therapist taught me also how to get my emotional needs met in healthier ways. So like they would encourage me, go and socialize, don't isolate yourself because yeah, when you have maladaptive daydreaming and other mental health issues, it's very, it makes you want to isolate. And going out your comfort zone is like the last thing you want to do. So they would encourage me also and show me how to take better care of myself. And they helped me to identify limiting beliefs I had that were holding me back from recovering. So this could be things like not believing I could go out my comfort zone, or not believing I could try new things, or even just not believing that I deserved to get better. I think these are quite common hidden beliefs that we can have. And one of the key emotional needs I needed to start meeting, because I didn't really have it at the time, was meaningful connection. So although I have family and friends, the issue was because of the depersonalization disorder, I was so dissociated from people and reality and myself for so long that I didn't feel connected to anyone. So it became incredibly lonely. And so then I recognized, and this is something I can advise people who have maladaptive daydreaming to consider. So I recognized that the daydreams were a way to get those emotional needs met. So but it doesn't really truly meet it, which is why it can be so addictive. So I recognized because of the loneliness, the daydreams were a way to try and simulate human connection with these characters that would appear, sometimes with daydreams or people I knew in real life. It was also a way to try and feel more in control and more empowered. That's why I believe there was so much rehearsal involved in the daydreams. And yeah, so these were ways to try and get these emotional needs met. Or sometimes I'd feel more validated than let's say my experiences in real life, where I'd feel better about myself after I've had a daydream, because those mental health issues made me have very low self-worth. Um, so one thing I wanted to mention is before I go into the meditation part, I came to realize that I believe most mental health issues, including maladaptive daydreaming, um, are a way for your mind and body to adapt to unresolved trauma or unmet emotional needs, and in some cases, chronic stress. So, um, so when I started learning about meditation, so I did mindfulness meditation and concentration based. Um, so with mindfulness meditation, it taught me it allowed me to become more self-aware and to learn what my triggers were. So I would learn that it was stress and difficult emotions and the fear of the depersonalization symptoms that would trigger daydreams. So the stronger those symptoms were, the more likely I was to daydream and for longer. And mindfulness meditation taught me to be able to neutrally observe and surrender to the intrusive thoughts and the difficult emotions. So I gained more emotional resilience over time. And it teaches you to notice your thoughts and the impulse to want to daydream and to not react immediately. So then you learn to pause and to decide, okay, should I daydream? Should I not daydream? And then you can choose instead to do something that's more beneficial. And it also taught me to sit with those uncomfortable emotions so that I didn't immediately want to escape. And by doing that, I learned to listen to my emotions so I could learn what unmet emotional need is there. And most of the time, it was just the need for feeling safe. And the more I did this, the more I was able to learn to go out of my comfort zone. And that reduced the urge to need to daydream because I was teaching my mind and my body, oh, we're safe. We can feel the stress. We don't have to daydream all the time. And I mentioned this because something I noticed I used to do, and I think others may do as well without realizing, is we tend to want to resist difficult emotions and symptoms, which is it's completely understandable. But the issue is it only reinforces to your mind that it's not safe to feel or to experience those kind of symptoms. And then that reinforces the need to daydream. So finally, I was also practicing concentration-based meditation. So what I would do is I would either have a point on the wall. I have have a piece of paper on the wall with just a dot, or I'd have a candle that I would light, and I would just focus on either, depending on which one I decide to do, focus on that point or focus on the candle flame for 5 to 10 minutes. And every time my mind would try and pull me into a daydream or get distracted, I would just, as best as I could, bring my attention back to that point or to the candle flame. And I just kept doing that over and over again for days, for several weeks. And it was after several weeks of doing the mindfulness meditation and concentration-based meditation, I started to notice I was getting better at noticing when I was daydreaming and snapping out of it, or I was getting better at noticing the urge to daydream and then choosing to not do that. But it's a long-term practice. It's like doing exercise. Like it takes time. So to summarize, it was I recovered because of the combination of therapy, identifying past traumas or unresolved traumas, also reducing chronic stress, learning about my unmet emotional needs, and then practicing daily mindfulness and concentration-based meditation. And these allowed me to surrender to the mental health issues and to the difficult emotions I was feeling. And that was teaching my body and my mind that I am safe and I can experience these things and it's not a threat, which meant there was less reason over time for my mind to resort to maladaptive daydreaming. And also through that process, I learned how to meet my emotional needs in a healthier way, such as human connection. And I learned how to increase my self-worth. And I learned how to get better at going out of my comfort zone and being okay with the discomfort. And yeah, so that's generally how I recovered. It took a while, but that's what I did.
That's a pretty incredible summary. To talk about an entire journey and an entire like shift in mental health perspective in 15 minutes. Um, I certainly was riveted, and I think that's going to be really helpful. I have one quick question before I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I've been trying meditation recently. When
Yeah.
you stare at a dot, like what do you think about? Because I can't not daydream when I do that. So
Uh,
what are you supposed to think about instead of daydreaming?
so it's not about not thinking. It's about you just let your mind do the thinking, but you keep your attention on the point. And every time it tries to bring, there's two things. There's the thinking and then your point of attention. So you let your mind do the thinking and then just, yeah, keep bringing it back to the point and repeatedly.
Okay, because I've been
Yeah.
trying that and it's a lot harder than it sounds. But
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I guess that's the point. Okay, well that was
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. So I
Thanks.
did put, and I will do it again, a link to your website. You also have a lot of videos on YouTube where you actually explain, and I think later you might even go into a little more detail, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's incredibly helpful. I will say, when listening to the two of you, I did keep a running mental list of places where I was like, oh my God, that's exactly like me. And other places where I was like, wait, that's maybe the opposite of me. So I think that's important, particularly for the mental health professionals. Like we are all different. So I like my thoughts are a little bit all over the place, but I'd like to just run through a little bit of some of those similarities and differences. One of the things, Rumzi, you said was the mouthing the words and the movement. For those of
Yeah.
you not familiar with MD, that is very much a part of maladaptive daydreaming, not for everybody, but for something like over 85% of us. There's some degree of what's been termed repetitive or kinesthetic movement where you find yourself pacing. As a child, I shook my fingers and twirled around with this string. If you would look at that behavior today, I think it would look like an autism, I think is what people would think. At the time, my parents didn't know what to make of it. Not sure why we do that, but I found that it got me into a trance-like state and propelled the daydreaming. Rumsey, you mentioned that allowed you really more to keep it in private. Where I learned when I was a child, I would do the daydreaming when I was bored and lonely. I was a lonely child. I had siblings much older than me and went to a private school, so didn't have friends in the neighborhood. And I would do the daydream when I was bored and I would spin. That to me was not problematic because I would only do it when there was nothing else to do and I was bored. When it became a problem was when I learned how to do it without the spinning. There was a period where I learned how to do it sitting still. And then it became all day, every day. Then I could do it in the middle of math class and social studies class. And for me, I took characters in my favorite soap opera and just invented new stories. And if you have a choice between algebra or soap opera, what are you going to pay attention to, right? Um, and so there it became, I was every second of the day, I was split between paying attention to what was going on in the real world and needing to check on my characters and spin stories. Unlike Kyla, though, I kind of had the opposite thought. Kyla, I heard you say that you felt like, what's the point of doing anything in the real world when you've got all this rich imagination? And I've heard that a lot. I made a conscious decision when I was young saying, I don't want to die with what's happened in my head being more exciting and interesting than my real world. So I decided I am gonna like super overachieve. Um, but I did it at a cost of exhaustion, right? Like I was constantly like, I was like, okay, study for 5 minutes, daydream for 5 minutes, um, pay attention in class, but as soon as kids ask stupid questions, you can turn back to their story. I made sure that I had a very normal looking life. Like I had friends, I had boyfriends, but I just wasn't interested in them. I would go out with groups of friends and I would ask a question that I knew would take a long time for someone to answer so I could quickly check back on my characters. So it was just this, if on the outside world, nobody would have said there was anything wrong with me, but I was just completely exhausted trying to live the two worlds at once, often not sleeping, and also feeling just so isolated from my peers, knowing that they weren't doing it and knowing like all this talk about, dating and all this stuff. I really didn't care. Like I had a checklist. I wanted to get everything done to look normal so I could go back to my characters. So some similarities and then some differences. I think one similarity across the board, and the research bears this out, is that it is a coping mechanism and that it does go along with comorbidities. The research is clear on that. The comorbidities can be different. They can be depersonalization. They can be autism. They can be ADHD. They can be social anxiety. They can be all sorts of things. But I do think it starts as a coping mechanism. But one area where I think I was different between the two of you is I know how it started because it was a coping mechanism. I was lonely. I had a learning disability that no one believed I had. I was in physical pain that no one believed. But then when I got older, my life got better and I was happier, and yet I was still doing it, right? I did like what you would, I didn't do the meditation, but I found areas in my real life that gave me joy. And I remember in college being like, I have what I want. I understand why I did this when I was a child. Why can't I stop it now? And I tried everything and I could not do it without medication. So kudos to the two of you who were able to. For me, I think because my comorbidity is OCD, it took a different turn. It started to be, I have to play this scene, and I would play the scene in my head, and then it'd be like, ooh, but the color's not right, or the character didn't say something exactly right, so I have to do it again. And it just became compulsive. And if I was in the middle of it and had to stop, it would eat at me. So I went to doctor. And first of all, no one had ever heard of such a thing. They told me there's no such thing as a daydream disorder. But one doctor looked at my family tree and said, wow, there's a lot of OCD in your family. This is not OCD. I don't know what it is, but since your family is so full of OCD, let's give you medication. It was an SSRI, like in the same family as Prozac and Paxil, which I know has different names across the world. I don't know what the names are across the world, but a standard SSRI. But they gave me one called fluvoxamine, which is more for obsessive thought, often prescribed in OCD. And that's what worked for me. In about 6 weeks, I couldn't have daydreamed if I tried. I didn't like that. I didn't like not being able to daydream at all. And through the years, I went up and down with my dose. So it got to the point where I could daydream when I really wanted to, like on a bus or a plane, but it was never the defining moment of my life. And I do wonder, and I've talked to like hundreds of people across the world. And for some, fluvoxamine has worked. For others, it hasn't. For some, Paxil and Prozac has worked. It did not work for me. Kyla, I think it did not work for you. So I've heard from some people that some pretty strong, like antipsychotic medicine, Abilify has worked. I've heard that some ADHD medication has worked, but I've also heard that it hasn't worked. And I think it all goes down to finding out what your comorbidity is, right? I think for me, because it was OCD, I had to get that OCD under control to get the daydreaming under control, right? And for that, I needed medication. So I do think it's about figuring out what the comorbidity is and trial and error. And with that, I mean, I have questions for Kyla and Rumzi, but if people either want to join in or put some questions in about what may have worked for you or haven't worked for you, it'd be really helpful. Roland.
Yes, so I can relate to a lot of what you said. And yeah, we are all seemingly very different, right? We're the same, but you're hearing these stories and they all come from different angles. I've spent 4 years of CBT trying to figure out what is it that triggered the MD in me, right? Like some of you. And we couldn't come away with anything. I mean, yeah, I grew up in a country that kind of fell apart, and but I grew up in a really sort of loving family. So we couldn't find anything until we realized is that I was born with this hypersensitive brain, right? So I'm a bit on the spectrum, right? So and this probably was the reason why the MD developed in the first place, because when you have a hypersensitive brain, you're constantly taking everything to the X degree. And it was the protection for me. But I also found later that I have a bit of those OCD traits. And this is what we're seeing in the research that Dr. Headley is doing in London, right? Is that there is a clear cohort of people that have those OCD traits, right? And so it seems like there's people with ASD, ADHD comorbidities. There's people with trauma. There's people with OCD traits. And that is why it's so interesting to bring everyone together because in one way we're the same, and in another way we came to this MD from different perspectives. So that's point number one. Point number two, I just want to thank you for all the speakers because I have a daughter with MD, and for me this is such great news that she's going to grow up in an environment and that there are people out there who now understand and even conduct coaching around this. It's a really, really positive development. I think I would encourage you to continue your work because, we can do so much for the children as well. So I'll stop here. But I just want to thank you so much for sharing your experiences.
Thank you, Roland. And you mentioned CBT, and I know Kyla, you've tried that and did not find it helpful. I mean, is that something that you're willing to
Yeah,
a little bit?
I mean, again, I think it just highlights that different things work for different people because, I think CBT, obviously, it's got a huge evidence base across a whole range of mental health stuff. And I think there is even some evidence that it can help in maladaptive daydreaming. But for me, it didn't. And I think you have to go back to what is the underlying problem here because CBT, cognitive, it's very thought based, whereas for me, I think I was emotionally dysregulated, and so I needed a therapy that was going to address the emotional side of things. I think it just means working with your doctor to try and find out what's going to be the type of therapy that's going to work for you.
Yeah, and I think it all goes back to we have different origins and different comorbidities. I believe, I mean, I don't like putting words into other people's mouths, but I believe that Dr. Sommer and I are on the same page that we both believe that some people are just born with this ability to have these immersive fantasies, but depending on in life and comorbidities, it can turn maladaptive for some people and not for others. I see a few hands up. Krista first and then Helium.
Hi, sorry guys. Oh wait, now I'll put my hand down. I don't know how to put my hand down. Sorry, yes I do. Hi, yeah. So I just wanted to step in as well, since everybody. First of all, thanks. It's great to see you all and speak with you all. And and I've met some of you before, I think, because I used to be involved with some of the ISMD stuff. But okay, so for me, for shortly, I just wanted to, I guess, add something in terms of different perspectives or how everybody's kind of different and how they come to it. So for me, and just because there's so many people and some things might help others, so that don't help someone else. So for me, I think of it very much as an addiction. Now it starts with I also have depression and anxiety and childhood I don't know if trauma, but anyway, issues. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I've been through therapy pretty much all my life. I'm 52 now, so for anybody young, I'm 52, and I'm still struggling with the urge to daydream maladaptively. Um, but yeah, so, and I think even perhaps maybe with the addictive kind of feelings or whatever, addictive tendencies, I think a lot of that, at least for me, it just has to do with learning to manage my emotions. So like I think Kyla and Rumzi and everybody kind of spoke with that, is like being able to learn to sit with and handle um, emotions. But so that's an ongoing thing. I'm still going through it. Kyla, I really thought when you're talking about looking for meaning in life, that's yeah. So I can just relate to so much of it. But yeah, the other thing I just want to say is that if anybody finds they have kind of addictive tendencies, like that's kind of how it is for me. Because if I so I was I had joined Overeaters Anonymous because I developed like a binge eating kind of thing. And then when I stopped that, well, the daydreaming was off and on all the time. But it was really kind of like a high for me. Like if I feel down, depressed, unhappy, life's not meaningful. This was a high, and certainly something I could control. Um, and yeah, so but if I managed that, then I found, oh, now I'm on social media. I know a lot of people get addicted to social media, but it seems like for me, it's always like it's like whack-a-mole. Is like, okay, if I get something under control, then something else pops up. Like so many ways for me to get uh, my high, to get out of feeling bored, to get out of feeling lonely, whatever. So anyway, that's just something else for other people to think about if it relates to them.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you, Krista. And the addictive, I mean, a lot of the research, and I did some years ago, I was involved in some of the early research. Um, I don't know if we can classify it as addiction, but most people use the word that it feels like it's addictive. And for the mental health professionals who are new to this, it's people used to ask me, well, can you control it? And I was like, well, it's not like it's schizophrenia, right? It's very important. We know it's not real and we are the one controlling it. But I used to explain it's like if I was on a diet and there's a half a sundae in front of me, like I really feel like it's a willpower. I really can't control it, but it's not coming from outside of me. It feels like an addiction. And when I did go into I had said early on that I had been in an fMRI machine, and that is, they study your brain waves. So they basically told me to daydream. And what they found was that first of all, they thought I was going to be a mind wanderer, which meant any off task thought, like thinking about what you have to do tomorrow, what you're going to eat for dinner, and it turned out I was not that at all. I did the mind wandering when they told me not to daydream, but when they told me to daydream, they said it was purposeful, constructive thought with imagery, and the same area of the brain that lit up if you showed a heroin addict a picture of drugs. So it definitely has an addictive component to it. So I think that's important. And we're going to go to helium in one other second. One other point that I think Kyla and Rumzi made, while it is true, I don't think I could have overcome it without medication. I do think getting involved in real world activities is extremely helpful. And that's, I hear from kids from all over the world asking questions. And, often you don't want to talk medication with someone under the age of 18. But as many activities in real life that you enjoy, like the one time as a kid that I was not daydreaming was when I was involved in like after school drama activities where I could use my imagination for real. And when you're pursuing a real life hobby or something you love, there's no space in your brain to daydream. So getting involved in as many activities in your real life that you really like certainly helps. Helium.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for all of you for your testimonies because for me, it really gives me hope. It really gives me hope to still want to fight this kind of problem. So, yeah, first of all, thank you, all of you. Your testimonies, I mean, gives a lot of perspective of the things that you can work with or how to approach this problem. So yeah, thank you for all of you. I also had kind of a question when trying to fight this disorder or problem. I know is kind of new thing is being researched upon. So, but yeah, when fighting this problem, um, I always come across with the annoying thought of, okay, when I'm trying to interact with people, with making connections with my friends, it always annoys me that all my friends, well, that's how I perceive them, have hobbies, have things that they constructed. And as for me, since I've been MDmer, I mean, I've been daydreaming for such long periods of time, I haven't constructed something meaningful or have hobbies or any sort of personality, and my social skills are very low. So there is a problem when talking about hobbies that when talking about hobbies, I mean, I see a lot of these people have constructed, have consistent activities and meaningful activities. And I have so much anxiety because I mean, I'm so shallow in that aspect. I mean, my main hobby was to daydream about many different storylines and stuff. And I feel kind of ashamed to share that. I mean, it's not like it's not like they ask me what like oh, what have you been doing this weekend? I'm not gonna answer, oh yeah, I've been daydreaming about fantasy wars. I mean, that seems kind of embarrassing, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I cannot shake off that feeling. I know, I know it is never too late to pick up a hobby and start doing productive things, but that thought always holds me back, and it's really awkward when try to make connections with people. I have to face this kind of thoughts. What are your recommendations or thoughts about this problem?
I have some thoughts, but Rumzi, do you want to? I see you nodding your head. You want to take it first, or
Yeah, sure. So a few things I can say is, um, yes, maladaptive daydreaming, it could definitely create a feeling of shame and also guilt. Just like you described, where you see other people doing things and you feel, I'm not doing those things, I'm not achieving things. But remember, one thing I can suggest is, because I also noticed you used the word fighting it, as in fighting the daydreaming. I'm going to suggest, I understand why you'd use that word, because it does feel like a never-ending fight. I can appreciate that. One thing you may want to consider is not seeing the daydreaming as like an antagonist, as an enemy, because really it's there as a way to try and protect you. So I could suggest maybe first seeing it in that way, because then it might help to reduce the feelings of guilt and shame, because it's like it may make it feel less like I'm losing a battle every day. And it may help to shift your perspective to, okay, there's a part of me that's trying to protect me, and I need to work with it to figure out what is it trying to protect me from. So that's the first thing I can suggest that can help to reduce feelings of shame and guilt and not feeling good enough. The other thing I can suggest is you said, I mean, you said you were creating fantasy worlds. I'm guessing, like, have you tried maybe exploring that in more constructive ways, like with writing, which, as we mentioned, lots of maladaptive daydreamers end up exploring writing? Or if not writing, have you tried art? Um, or acting was mentioned as well. So you may want to also explore those kind of things. And also you might want to look at how do you feel when you're in the daydreams? Are there patterns? So do they make you feel empowered? Do they make you feel creative? And then see, are there hobbies in the real world that give you those kind of feelings as well? Because it could be that's the emotional need that isn't being met in real life, but the daydreams might be trying to meet that for you.
yeah, Absolutely. And I see Valeria's hand. But first, I want to say, I think it's actually brave of you for sharing. And the shame is something we've all felt. So I guess I can't speak for everyone, but every MDR that I've ever spoken to, we've 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 felt shame. And
Mhm.
I don't know, and especially I felt a lot of shame when I was younger. And if I could go back in time, I would be much nicer to my younger self because we're all doing the best we can and we're all protecting ourselves the best we can. And we're getting up and we're going forward, right? The best we can. Um, and yes, MD is, I'm not making light of it. I hate when people were like, oh, you were so creative, but there is like in my experience, the people who I have talked to about it have been extremely intelligent, creative people. So there is another side to it. So it's like if you can tap into that side, um, where there is less shame. And then my last advice is one of the things I tried early on was like trying to stop cold turkey never worked for me until I like was on a lot of medication, right? That's actually something we should talk about. But one of the things I suggest is just trying to spend a little bit more time in real life every day, right? Sign up for one hobby to try, right? Try an acting class and say for 1 hour a week, I am going to be fully focused on this class. And if that's not for you, then next week try a writing class, like, or next week just keep trying hobbies and say like I am going to spend, next week I'm going to spend, 2 full hours fully engaged in something. And then each week raise the number of hours or minutes that you're in real life as opposed to thinking about the number of hours you're decreasing. I don't know, does that make any sense? And then Helium, I see your hand is back up. So you want to go ahead and respond to any of that before we go to Valeria?
Oh, I would prefer like Valeria Franco goes first, then
Oh, okay.
I could.
Valeria?
Hi, hello everyone. So yes, I'd like to say something regarding what both Jane and Rumzi have just said, and it's true. It's not really a battle, and it takes time to build something new, because when we consider maladaptive dreaming as something that we can fight, we are not framing it properly. Maladaptive dreaming is not a choice. So if we consider that just as a daydreaming, we can say to ourselves, okay, tomorrow I won't daydream. I will commit myself not to daydream. And this is all based on willpower. But this is not something that we can fully control. We think that we can control, but we can't. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking about that. It's hard. It's sort of addiction or a compulsion. So if we rely on the thought that, okay, tomorrow I will do better, I will control it, it's not going to work, because maybe you can do it one day, 1 week, or even 1 month, but life is hard. And next time you are tired or stressed, you will go back to daydream, because willpower only works when you are at your best, when you have full energy. And that doesn't last because, life is not always easy. And on the other side, as Jane was saying, we need to grow other interests, but we don't, as Kyla was saying before, we don't have those yet, because we are daydreaming all the time. And it's like the daydreaming is such a big part in our lives. So we can't expect just to shut it down and do something else. It's more like, in my experience, it's more like having something like a new branch. We are a tree and we have this huge branch that is maladaptive dreaming, and we can't just take it off. We need to grow a new branch, and we need to try more than one and see which one is stronger. And when this new branch is strong enough, the maladaptive dreaming branch will dry out little by little because all the energy will be in the new branch that will be painting, it will be friendship, it will be anything. It doesn't need to be creative. It's rich, it's full of meaning, and it takes time to grow that. So, in my experience, don't be scared because it takes time. I think it really helps to visualize it as something that needs to grow, it needs to take time, and but it's the only thing to get rid of daydreaming, like little by little taking out energy from it and put it somewhere else.
And shameless
Can
plug.
I just,
Oh,
sorry, Jayne, go on.
Oh, just very quick. I mean, one way to not be daydreaming is when you're versed in things like the ISMD, like chat rooms about you. You're not daydreaming right now, right? Chat rooms about maladaptive daydreaming or volunteering for the ISMD. I know we got a few people involved in some projects, and when they got involved in those projects about maladaptive daydreaming and became an advocate for maladaptive daydreaming, all of those are hours not spent daydreaming. But go ahead, Kyla.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. That reminds me of something else I was going to say as well, is that one of the ways, because you're right, we do all feel shame about this, and one of the ways to get over shame wants you to hide, and one of the ways to get past that is actually to connect with people. And so organizations like the ISMD, or even just online support groups like Reddit or Discord or whatever, spaces where you can communicate with other maladaptive daydreamers, that's so important in moving past the shame. But the bit I was just going to jump in and say was, as well, when we talk about fighting it, or like you said, some people try to just stop cold turkey or whatever, we're putting the focus in slightly the wrong place there, I think, because then the focus becomes on the daydreaming being the bad thing rather than the maladaptive part of it being the bad thing. I always say you don't overcome the daydreaming, you overcome the maladaptive bit. That's what you need to be focusing on. I mean, I don't think I actually said it in my presentation. I still daydream. It's a huge part of my life, but it's a really positive, healthy thing now rather than being something that holds me back. And I think when we talk about quitting or stopping or going cold turkey or whatever, you're putting the focus in slightly the wrong place for a lot of people.
That was actually going to be I was going to ask both you and Rumzi about, like, one doctor who told me that, I had to give up the daydreaming completely, kind of like, if you're an alcoholic, you have to, and I found that not to be true. I still daydream, but in much more of a controlled way. So I was going to ask both of you your opinions on that bit.
I mean, I think, for me, it's just the way my brain's wired. I think in stories, it's how I process what's happened to me. It's now a way that I regulate my emotions in a healthy way. It's just, I don't think I'd be functional without it. But I have overcome all the sort of the bad side of it.
Can you explain a little bit, like, what like how it's more functional? Like, what's the difference between?
It's a source of motivation now. I was talking about how it took away my motivation, because why do you want to do anything in reality if you can just daydream it? Whereas now it's more like when I was writing the book, I'm like, I want to write a book. And so I will have those mental conversations with my daydream characters, almost using them like substitute therapists or something, and I get them to encourage me. So that's one way I can do it. And just on the emotional side as well, I think another thing that sometimes people don't want to acknowledge is that the emotions that you experience in the daydream, they are real. Even if you've made up a fictional character, and I see people on social media saying, they feel really stupid for having an emotional connection with somebody they invented. But actually, if that's real and it's a positive force in your life, why not use it? There'll be times with anyone in real life. I mean, I'm married, I've got kids. There are times when I have some sort of tension with the people in my family, but I've always got that huge source of love with my daydream characters that I can sort of tap into, and that enables me to show up as a more loving, compassionate human being in my real life relationships, because I know I've always got that.
That's amazing. Rumzi, I see you nodding your head. Do you agree we don't have to stop completely daydreaming completely?
Exactly, yeah. So I've always had a very visual way of thinking and a strong imagination, even since I was a child, which maybe is why daydreaming was one of the reasons, was one of the cope mechanisms. But yeah, now um daydreaming is just part of my thinking process. I don't always use it, but I know it's a way my mind can use to think. So if I'm trying to conceptualize something, I don't do very well. Like, let's say I'm going to go and buy food from the shops. I don't do well memorizing the words, but I do well if I memorize the images of what I'm going to buy. And that's technically using a type of daydream. But if I also am trying to understand something or read something, daydreaming will happen, but the difference is it's under my control. And yeah, I can relate to the idea if you have characters um in my mind, but they are like extensions of my thinking. And I know they're not real. I know it's just my brain is using these characters because it's in a way almost like more effective to have a dialogue with them in my mind to figure something out. But I know it's not real. I know it's just a form of thinking.
I mean, for me, I know the difference, like for me, pre-medication and post-medication, is that, when I used to daydreaming, if someone would interrupt me in the middle, it would be so hard and so stressful. Or, I mean, when I was where I live in New York City, so I take the subway, I would used to like hide from friends who were leaving work at the same time so that they wouldn't walk with me to the subway so that I could, have my daydreaming time. And now I actually like wait and seek out friends to go with. Or, I mean, I met my niece for brunch a couple weekends ago, and it was a beautiful fall day. I daydreamed the entire walk. But when I got to the restaurant, I hadn't finished the daydreaming, but I saw my niece and I was just happy to see her, and I just went on with my day. Whereas in the prior to the medication, I would have had to run to the bathroom and I had to finish the story. So I'm still daydreaming, but it doesn't feel that compulsive. Like I let it go. It comes in when I'm like absolutely bored and then goes back again. Um, a question I have for both of you. Although Rumzi, did you want to share any slides? Because I want to make sure we save time for that. But or
Oh, I didn't do
you
slides
didn't.
at the
Okay.
beginning.
A question I have though then for both you and Kyla is we talked, I think, before we officially started about mental health professionals don't know about maladaptive daydreaming, and so many much have been told, don't believe everything you read on the internet. It's not a real disorder. But yet you both, I think, had some, help from mental health professionals. So how do we go about finding mental health professionals when no one knows about maladaptive daydreaming?
Okay, so you okay if I go first, Rumzi?
Yeah, you can go first. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in my case, although therapy was a huge part of my recovery, and I probably couldn't have done it without, it was, as I said, for me, I had to cure my depression and my maladaptive daydreaming at the same time. And yeah, I did say cure deliberately there. I know that's a word a lot of mental health professionals get a little bit anxious about saying cure, but that's how it feels to me. The work that I did in therapy was always mainly focused on the depression because that's what therapists do know about and can be very helpful with. So although therapy was crucial to me, it was always more focused on overcoming the depression. And I think, therefore, for me, it didn't matter if my therapist didn't know what maladaptive daydreaming was. I mean, for one thing, if they're a good therapist, they should be willing to listen to your experience and learn how this is showing up for you, even if they haven't come across it before. But also, if you're trying to work on the underlying issue as well, then find a therapist that can help you with that, because then that frees up, So I was managing depression and maladaptive daydreaming together. So that's two mountains to climb, if you like. If I've got a therapist that can help me with the depression side, that means I've got more headspace to then work on the maladaptive daydreaming side. So I think if you've got multiple things going on, then you can use therapy to work on the other things.
Yeah, I see a few hands, but Rumzi, do you have anything to add, or do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Like you don't necessarily need a specialist in maladaptive daydreaming. With the therapists I work with, they kind of got the idea of what it was, but it was never the focus. It was more focused on resolving the anxiety, depression, and depersonalization. Yeah, so I agree with Kyla on that. You don't necessarily need a specialist, but someone who's open-minded to generally understand the
Yeah,
daydreaming.
and I see a few hands, but that's exactly what I'd say. Keep in mind, most mental health professionals will not have heard about it. It is not in the DSM. It is not recognized anywhere. It is not taught in any psychology program or any medical school. So you can't expect a mental health professional to have heard of it, but you can expect them to be open-minded. If they tell you there's no such thing and it doesn't exist, then I would recommend going to someone else. Instead, you want to show them the articles. The ISMD has a whole page full of empirical articles. If they're not willing to read and learn about it, then it shows that they're not open-minded, and you maybe want to try someone else. But finding someone who specializes in whatever your comorbid condition is I think what you really need to do. Ines.
Yes, hi. I just want to, well, I want to start thanking you all. It means a lot. It means everything to know that you're not the only person in the world with this. I can just start with a bit of my history with MD. I am 24, so young, and I've been daydreaming really since I can remember. Maladaptive dreaming, perhaps the last 10 years, and I found about MD in 2020 and have been sort of ignoring it until recently. So I am sort of in a threshold of trying to take back control of my life. Kyla's book helps a lot. So thank you, Kyla.
Thank you.
I've sort of a question and half reflection. One thing that I find the hardest when being in a daydream is this emotional attachment to the story, to the characters. Like you're in the middle of action. Seriously, I can feel it in my body. And even if there's a part of me that says, Ines, this is not real, you have to, especially recently, you have to snap back out of it. It almost always pulls me back, which then leads afterwards when I'm aware that I've lost that present time, then it leads inevitably to shame and guilt and everything we've been discussing. So this emotional attachment, do you have any sort of advice on how to manage that during, I suppose this long-term healing process is of course one way, but some quick like way of managing it in a moment. If you have any ways to how did you do it, for example, if you felt the same. That's my question.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, no, Rumzi, you go.
Okay, I was going to make two suggestions. So I can suggest one thing I used to do to get out daydreams faster, which might sound weird, was I would imagine the daydream being on like a TV or like a YouTube video, and I would imagine myself fast forwarding it. So I would still be experiencing the daydream, but faster. And for some reason, my mind was able to accept that. Not always, but and so what I can suggest is try that, where you're increasing the speed of the daydream a little bit more each time, because I think that would possibly allow your mind to little by little let go of it faster. And the other thing I could suggest is purposefully ending the daydream earlier and then allowing yourself to sit with the discomfort, which it'll be difficult at first. But when you do that little by little, you're kind of weaning yourself off the daydreaming, but also training your body, I can feel the discomfort as well.
Yeah, I would sometimes you need a good cry. So if like you let a character die, then let yourself cry but then you do have to then it goes back to setting goals for the day. Okay. Like, okay, I've cried. Now I have to go back and I have to turn my attention to the real world. But I do agree with sitting, which is so hard, but I do agree with sitting with the emotion for a while.
And one thing I found, which is really weird, actually. It sounds mad, but it's really hard to daydream when your characters are not cooperating with you. So if you know that you actually need to stop daydreaming and say go and do some studying or something, but you don't want to, you want to keep daydreaming. You imagine your character saying to you, no, sorry, you've got to go study now. You can't carry on with the daydream when your character is telling you to do something else. And it sounds weird, but I found that really worked for me.
Yeah, that worked for me too. That worked for me too, actually. Like I did that too. You have to go ahead and do it now. And then planning things, right? Planning to meet a person for lunch or at a certain time, right? Like even as much as I daydream, like when a group, if you're talking one-on-one, it's hard to daydream. So plan to attend an ISMD meeting, plan to meet a friend for lunch, plan to meet someone that you met in one of these chat rooms. So you have a hard stop that you have to stop daydreaming at the moment. We are ending at 12:30. I'm happy to stay on for people who have individual questions. I don't know if Kyla and Rumzi have the time to do it. I did want to make
I can stay for a little while.
Okay, because I think Hilliam still has his hand up, and I think there might be one other, and there were some questions in the chat. But also feel free to jump off, whoever needs to, at 12:30. I do want to make one last pitch for the ISMD. In the beginning, I was letting people in the room, sending people the link, trying to record, and so I don't even remember what I said. But a few people in the chat mentioned the DSM. The only way it's ever going to get in the DSM is if we continue to advocate for it. There's a small but mighty team of researchers around the world trying to continue the work on it. And frankly, if it were not for them, there would not even be like any research or any recognition of MD. And really the only way that's going to happen is if we keep advocating for it. So that is a pitch to join the ISMD. We have lofty goals, one day sending people to research conferences, to training mental health professionals. But it's hard to do when we have like very little money and are all volunteers. So we're looking for more volunteers. We're looking for members. It's a nominal cost to join, and even just a small donation. So I'm going to put the ISMD link again in the chat, as well as both Rumzi's and Kyla's personal blogs where you could get more information on them. So I'll say this is the official end of the program here, but we will stay on to take questions. And I really do want to thank Kyla and Rumzi. I've talked to a lot of people about MD, but the two of you are particularly inspiring and helpful. So thank you so much for sharing. So that's the official end, but I did see, Helium, if you're still here and have a question, we're happy to stay on.
Oh yeah, no. So yeah, I just wanted to add to the recommendations you gave me. First of all, I mean, you mentioned that, I mean, you were calling out that I called this a fight, and yes, you are right. That wasn't the right word to choose, because actually, something that echoed in my mind was when I was reading I don't know if you have mentioned this resource, but someone called Eritaya, I don't know how she was called, but she wrote a guide to maladaptive daydreaming. It's a pretty famous resource that is shared among the community, and she was also mentioning that, I mean, seeing MDS, I mean, like black and white, a pure enemy to fight and something to erase is kind of a bad thing, because yeah, MD raised, I'm sorry, as a mechanism to protect you from something, and completely erasing that can be pretty much not ideal. So yeah, we have to be very careful with that. I mean, as you mentioned a lot of times, the main thing to do when dealing with MD is just identifying like the underlying causes that led us to this behavior. So thank you for reminding me that. And also, fortunately, with the recommendation you gave me to, I don't know, start writing something. I don't know how to feel about that because my hobbies or my orientation isn't in that way. Actually, I'm more interested in sciences. So, but I don't know, something way back to me when you mentioned that is because, well, when I was in my previous job, I was just to kill some time, I was programming a game on Python, a very simple game, and my friends came up to me and say, "Hey, I mean that's a pretty interesting thing you're doing. I mean, it can be useful for you as I don't know, some sort of way to earn money passively. I mean, not actively, but it can be helpful." And well, you suddenly reminded me of that. I mean, I can use all my creative energy on that project if I don't know. I just
Yeah.
wanted to thank you about all the ideas you gave me. And I
And
wanted to thank you again for your time and for sharing your experiences. It was really helpful and really gives a lot of people, I don't know if that is just my case, but it gives a lot of hope to keep
thank
working on yourself.
Thank you very much for sharing. And the only thing that I would add to what you said is, um, I mean, it's even if you go into a career like STEM, I'm a human rights lawyer. There's not a lot of room for creativity there, but you can always have, I think most of us have a need for some sort of creative outlet. So there could always be some sort of hobby that involves writing or creativity or imagination. And I do think that is helpful for MD, but thank you very much for sharing. Um, I did notice in the chat, someone said about an ideal version of themselves. The research shows like that is in, huge majority of daydreams. That's very, very common. We all want to be, that's one of the best things about our daydream worlds is that if we are in it, why not make ourselves the best perfect version of ourselves?
And just to sort of add to that, I mean, the way I look at it is who you are in your daydream world. And this isn't true for everyone because some people explore being somebody totally different or they're not even in their daydreams or whatever. But for a lot of people, if you're more that idealized version of yourself, is that actually who you are when you're in a completely safe environment and you don't have to worry about what anyone else thinks? And that just thinking about it in those terms really helped me in my recovery process to realize this isn't some unrealistic idealized version of me. That's my kind of highest potential, if you like.
Yeah, maybe I could add on this as well, but it's also, I think, is sometimes I used to have idealistic imagination of the world. So, for example, topics like understanding the dark side of the human nature, I couldn't understand it until I understood that I have MD and that I have idealistic expectation of other people, right? So there's also that aspect of we don't just expect ourselves to be ideal, but we also have similar expectations of other people, right? And so I don't know if others have this, but I've recently discovered that I was completely ambivalent to the dark side of the human nature because I thought everyone's, perfect.
Yes, I'm always disappointed in people. I don't know if that is MD or not, but maybe, right? The real world is kind of disappointing because, compared to these perfect people that we have perfect control of over our heads, the real world kind of sucks. Like that's there was a point, I think, that when Helium, which I don't know your real name, was talking that I think is important. You mentioned that losing or getting control of this daydream world, that can be scary too, which is why it's so important to do all of this with a mental health professional. Because I remember when I got to the point on the medication where I couldn't daydream anymore, and then I had some pretty scary medical stuff, and not having the characters was terrifying. So whatever, I think in this journey, having a mental health professional alongside you is very important. I'm also going to put my email in the chat, looking for ideas for new, new webinars, ideas to make the ISMD more interesting and attractive to get people to join. So we're just open for any ideas you have. So, or any questions we didn't answer. So I put my email in that. Kyla, Rumzi, any parting thoughts or any parting questions before we sign off?
No,
I think we've
You both were incredible. Like I
I know
said,
I think there's one more hand up I was going to point out.
I don't see
There was
it.
still one or two people had their hands up.
I don't see them, but if anyone has a question, just
I
jump
think it's
in.
Jamie.
Maybe? Jamie? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't see it. I've had my hand up for quite a while.
I'm sorry, I
So
didn't see it.
yeah, no, not your fault. I was just like, hey, what's going on? But yeah, I actually wanted to like I'm super interested in learning more about the ISMD, but I did want to say like um if the goal of the ISMD is to like represent the like goals and interests of people who do MD or have MD, depending on how you think of it. Um, I actually would suggest that there are counter arguments to wanting MD to be recognized as a psychiatric disorder in the DSM. I actually went to school to become a mental health professional, and decided to leave that because there, of course, there's problems with that. Um, and so my counter argument, my main counter argument would be that what happens with the DSM is that you get, something recognized as a quote unquote disorder. It gets, categorized and sort of they make a bucket and put a label on it, and then it sort of enables maybe less nuanced or less skilled mental health professionals to just see like which bucket do I need to put this person in, and and it can become very it just has the document itself, the DSM itself as a like document that exists in the world has the habit of just kind of like essentializing people and mental behaviors and mental challenges into like these categories that the world and people just aren't really like that. And I think it's important to recognize like since maladaptive daydreaming is a mental behavior that can be something that people with totally different like mental health histories and totally different life histories sort of like use as a tool for whatever reason they're using it for. It's hard to even say that it's like that the daydreaming itself is like a symptom of a mental disorder even. And I I would love to explore like alternative ways of conceiving of this because maybe even the category of mental disorder is not as useful of a category as we think it is just in mental health in general. And I think because MD is I think there's a greater potential here, right? Because MD is so like it's hard to define and hard to pin down in this way, it could actually offer a way of sort of expanding how we in the West even think of like what mental health is or how we address it. Because it's a perfect example of like something that doesn't fit into the standard way of thinking of the mental health industry. And so I think there's a greater potential there. And I personally would not support or participate in trying to get MD recognized as a official DSM mental disorder because I don't think that that's like very useful in my perspective.
So interesting. I think maybe we even have a whole other discussion, like even like a debate on whether it should be in the DSM or not. I'm sure we each have a different opinion, but I do personally agree with the fact that I just don't even like the entire classification system. I think a lot of I think we've gotten into a place where we're putting things in buckets that all overlap. But I think the practical side of me says is the DSM is what exists right now and it's what we're stuck with. And to get to get insurance, as Jayne Kemp wrote in the thing, like I think this is the system we're stuck with, like to get insurance coverage and to have a doctor not say, well, there's no such thing, and end up diagnosing you with autism or schizophrenia or something else. That's a question. I would prefer to break the whole DSM and start all over, because I don't think these buckets even work. And I'm not even sure, to be honest, whether MD is a disorder in and of itself or a symptom of many other disorders, right? Because it's a symptom of depression. It's a symptom. I honestly don't know. But I think the one thing we'd be agreement is that it's got to be recognized somehow, right? Or how to, or how do we get attention to it? But you just gave me a new idea for another webinar. Let's have a conversation about whether,
Yeah.
That will be such an interesting webinar.
Yeah,
Yeah, I almost am thinking of it like, okay, there are like people, and not even in the context of addiction, right? But there's just like many people will use an activity, whether it be a physical activity, mental activity, social activity, anything like that, as a way of not being present. And someone might run too much in a way that's like disrupting their life. And we think of that even as something that's like good for you, right? But people can even use activities that are supposed to be quote unquote good for you in a way that's sort of disruptive to their life, or they're overdoing it or whatever, right? And the capacity to use imagination and to daydream is like an inherent human capacity, just like running is, right? And so it seems, I don't know, it just seems like complicated.
Yeah, and I think I definitely think it's worth a discussion about. I would push back on, like, I wouldn't say it's the same as like any other activity, just because we're seeing, like, you don't see every single runner, like most people who identify as maladaptive daydreaming have comorbid activities, right, or histories, which is not the same for a lot of other positive, right? There's the history is showing it's connected with so many different mental health disorders, which is not the truth for most human behaviors. So I think there is something, definitely disordered there, but is it a symptom of other things? Is the DSM the best way to go? That I don't know, but we need to raise awareness, because we can't have people walking into mental health professional's office and them telling us that there's no such thing. But if you don't mind, if you could send me an email, I'd love to maybe set up a debate. Roland, I see your hand, but I do know there was one person who's had their hand for a very long time that I just noticed. But you might have SODHI, SODHI, is that? No. Okay.
Yeah, they had their hand up before, yeah.
They had their, because Jamie and them, they were on the same page, and I just missed the entire page.
They're back.
They're back.
They're back on my screen anyway.
Okay. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sadi.
That's okay.
Okay,
Sodi.
thank you.
It's
Sodi.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add something that I noticed that really hit home was this started for me at a very young age as well. But what it hit home was the fact that my emotional needs as a young person were never met. So that's why I created these characters to meet those emotional needs. Now I'm 56 years old now, married with children, have a loving wife, doting, but I still go back to those characters that I created that would care about me. Like, I have a very nice life.
Yeah.
Everything is good. Like, looking into my life, you wouldn't see this.
And it's also possible that it's not maladaptive, though, right? Like, not, just keep in mind, all daydreaming this way is not maladaptive.
Well, I've been told it actually saved my life, because what I went through was very bad. It saved my life. So it was adaptive. It got me here. But I guess why I'm here, why I've joined you folks who are doing wonderful work, is I can't stop it. It feels, I wrote earlier, it's like alcohol. Like, I turned to drugs and alcohol as well. It makes you feel so good without anything else. And it's there, like, immediately available.
Yeah.
For whenever there's a bit of stress, there's whatever it might be, it's like, let me run off over here.
Yeah. And I think the trick, and Rumzi and Kyla, you would know more about this than me, is how do you still keep that as a coping mechanism, but keep it under control?
Yeah. And that's
right?
what I find. Like I can be sitting with my loving family at home, whether we're having dinner, and it's like, oh, let me just run off to this wonderful little place for a bit.
Yeah. And again, that's okay unless it starts, right? And
Well, it
starts
interferes. It
interfering with
interferes.
it
It interferes.
interferes,
It
right?
interferes. Like I've been fortunate enough to travel around the world, and I have a therapist on it, but I tell her I'm away. There's times I don't remember where I've been. That's how nuts it is.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
the trick. And I couldn't do it, to be honest, without I just couldn't. I tried without medication, but that's Rumzi and Kyla, you both have figured out how to do it.
Yeah, and it
It-
doesn't sound like my experience now is all that different. I still have these characters that I am very deeply emotionally attached to, and yes, I also have a loving family in the real world, and it's just about finding a balance and kind of making room for both. And I mean, all I can say is that that balance is there to be found, and how we do it is probably different for everyone. Unfortunately, I think you do have to find your own solutions to a certain extent, but that balance is there because I don't think my situation is that different, and yet for me it works.
Your book was wonderful. Thank you for writing that, Kyla. It's really good.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
And I do think, you know, the meditation and the things that Rumzi's talking about, which, you know, my daydreaming is under control, but I'm dealing with some depression and anxiety. So I'm gonna start trying to meditate, but I'm
Yeah.
finding it very difficult because my brain
Well, this was
wanders.
something we never really
Yeah.
cycled back to, wasn't it? Was the whole meditation thing, because I think possibly getting started with meditation is kind of uniquely difficult for us because our daydreaming is just as soon as you sit down and you try and get quiet and sort of cut out the external distractions, then that one big internal distraction is just going to pop right up, isn't it? And I think, I mean, maybe Rumzi can just hop in a minute and say how long it took you to notice benefits from meditation. For me, I actually did an in-person mindfulness course that was 8 weeks, and it took me the full 8 weeks to get the hang of it and to start feeling the benefits. So, you know, if you've tried it and it's really, really hard, just be kind to yourself, accept that it will be hard, and eventually you will start to notice some benefits from it.
Yeah, the time frame you gave was roughly the same for me as well. It was after several weeks of doing it daily and failing many, many, many times, which is part of the process. Then I started to notice, I have some level of control, something is shifting. So it's about persevering and knowing your progress won't be linear. It's going to be up and down, but it's think of it more in terms of months progress, not don't focus on what you're doing in terms of daily progress. It's a long term, you're like unlearning old habits and learning new ones. So it takes time.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to the all three things that Rumzi that you said, and also figuring out what need this is meeting and how to meet it in the real life. But Kyla, the balance is there to be found, right? And it can be found at any age. So it is a challenge, but it is doable. Roland, I think you're our last hand.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to get back what Jamie was talking about because I do have a strong opinion about that. I agree that DSM needs to be torn apart for neurodiversity because labels are too generic. But it is the system we have. And if we don't recognize MD, imagine having a child and the system telling you that you're crazy for many, many years. And then it tries to take away a child from you because you've made up this condition called maladaptive daydreaming, right? So I think we absolutely need to recognize it because I've lived this story and it's not pleasant. And I don't like the labels. I think it's not great, but it's the system we live in, and I think we owe it to ourselves to push for recognition. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, and you could do two things at once. You can push for like blowing up the whole DSM, but as long as you have the DSM, it's got to be in it, right? If
Correct.
the DSM is existing and that's how we're deciding how to pay insurance, or at least in the US, I don't know about other countries, but if that's how you're getting diagnoses and whatever, like it shouldn't not be there. But we can also argue at the same time that all these categories don't make a lot of sense. And, you know, right, like it's and is putting people in boxes where they don't really fit. But I think I have my idea for my next webinar. And I also think we need something specifically on meditation too. Because I think that's something that would help a lot of us. But I also think a lot of us, when we first try, don't like it because we're so bad at it. Right. But I think we had to try. So I think that is it. I feel I like missed hands for such a long time now that I'm all like paranoid. Did I get absolutely everybody? I think I did. Yeah, I did. Thank you for all of us for staying. Oh my gosh, we went for almost 2 hours, and I just so appreciate everybody's time and everybody who shared their stories, and particularly Kyla and Rumzi. This was really incredible. So thank you, everybody.
Oh, thanks so much, Kyla, Rumzi, and Jayne.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Good to see you,
Bye-bye.
Jayne. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.